Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Sandy.
And this is the Italian American Stories podcast. Okay, last episode for Angelina Garramone, episode 4.
Gonna be a good one too.
It is. So we hope you guys have been enjoying Angelina's story as much as we have. I think for Mom and I, like, Colorado stories and Denver stories always hold a special place in our heart. But regardless, I feel like no matter where this story took place, it would be one of my favorites. It's pretty crazy. Okay, so we last left off with the police officers interrogating Concetta and Stella. They took the police officers back to the crime scene where Maria was murdered. Where we're going to pick up today is the background of Concetta. And like we said, she's got a doozy of a background too. So let's go ahead and dive on in. So in 1893 in Denver, Concetta was arrested for cruelty towards her children. She apparently compelled her young son, Nicholas, to tie his younger sister, Antonia, who was only 6 years old, to the bedpost of her bed. And just a forewarning going forward from here, this is a little brutal. So if you want to skip a few seconds, we totally understand, because it does involve some pretty cruel things to children. So once Antonia was tied up, Concetta heated a fire poker and burned Annie all over her arms and legs. Just this statement right here makes me almost not believe anything that she said when it came to Maria. Because,
that's true.
Because she tried to make it out like, I didn't want anything bad to happen to Maria, but you're willing to do this to your own child. So I have trouble believing anything you say now.
Yeah, there's so both of them
much going on here. Right. So after Concetta felt like she had burned her daughter enough, she hung her on a hook in the house. And it sounds like she didn't hang her by her neck, but more by her clothes. I almost picture that scene in Home Alone where Kevin is in the neighbor's house and the burglars catch up to him and hang him by the neck of his sweater on a coat hook connected to the door. Like, that's kind of what I'm picturing.
Well, that's a better picture than what most people would picture when you're saying they hung him up on something.
And a neighbor was actually the one to find Antonia. Apparently, this neighbor could hear the little girl crying and screaming, and she came over and rescued her. And Concetta and her son were both arrested. And Concetta she just gets better and better, man. She actually blamed her son for the whole thing and said she had nothing to do with it. But Nicholas said the only thing he did was tie her up with the rope. Now, keep in mind, he's a little boy, and she is trying to blame him for all of this. It's so crazy. The little girl, she did survive. She was in the hospital for a really long time. And Concetta was only sentenced to 6 months in jail. But Nicholas, he was sent to reform school for 3 years, and she only got 6 months. I don't even know.
That makes no sense. They take kids from others, and then this one is abusive.
It's crazy. But I guess one thing we can think of is maybe it was a blessing that Nicholas was removed from the home. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. But the Italians in Denver were so mad. In fact, they threatened to lynch Concetta, but was prevented from doing so by the local authorities. And this event, the Italian colony remembered this when Maria was killed in 1910 and Concetta was involved. Even Concetta's husband, Nicola, he claimed that she was alone to blame for the trouble she was in. He was quoted saying she should have stayed home and minded her own business. So he wasn't at all concerned with the fate of Concetta. But of course, he was very worried about what would happen to his daughter, Stella.
Right.
So Angelina's defense attorney for the murder trial even referenced the incident with Concetta and her children in his opening remarks by saying, quote, "A woman who will sear her children with red hot irons, as Miss Forgione is known to have done, would stop at no crime." And I completely agree with that.
Right.
We talked about that earlier. It makes you question everything she said. I found an interesting photo in the Denver Rocky Mountain News of Concetta and Stella. The two women are wearing like these really big hats with flowers and just kind of looking into the camera like, with this smug look, like, why are you taking our photo? We'll post that up on social media.
Kind of like Angelina.
Yeah, like, you can't touch me. Concetta and Stella were not the only ones interviewed about Angelina's involvement in Maria's murder. Luigi was interviewed by authorities, and he basically said that Angelina probably is guilty, but he can't really say because she's never around and never tells him anything. So I don't think they had a great marriage. I mean, I think she just did whatever she wanted. Luigi then went on to explain how Angelina was a good wife for a few years and how she ran a successful real estate business while he peddled vegetables. You sure about that, Luigi? Like, I don't know. He said that he bought 6 houses with the money he made and said Angelina took out mortgages on all 6 houses and apparently forged his name as well. Lastly, he claims that Angelina stole $15,000 from him. So
Wow.
Definitely not that great of a marriage. In fact, Luigi, he was quoted saying in an article from the Denver Post that, quote, "What she'd do with the money, I don't know. Do I care what happens to her? No, I do not care. I don't know whether she killed Maria LaGuardia, and if she didn't kill her, she'd not tell me anything about it. She'd be away from home most all of the time, and she'd never tell me anything." And when asked how he felt if she was hanged for the crimes she was accused of, Luigi stated, "If she get hanged, that's none of my business. None of her business was my business before." So he was pretty checked out, I think.
Yeah, which you can't blame him.
Oh, no, not at all. So Luigi and Angelina's son, Finabello, he was also arrested, and he claimed that he didn't think his mother killed Maria, but he did agree with his father that Angelina was absent quite a bit. He even stated that his mother would be gone for weeks at a time, and when she came back would say nothing regarding what she'd been up to. Apparently, the months before Angelina was arrested for fraud charges in 1910, she wasn't even living at their home. She apparently was renting a boarding room in downtown Denver, which downtown Denver in 1900s, it wasn't all shopping malls. Back then, it was, you could shop for other stuff, but not that. So... But Finabello, he seems genuinely confused on why he was under arrest. He claimed that on the morning of the murder, he was just working in his garden and had no idea what his mother was up to. But after Angelina was officially charged with the murder of Maria, a Louise Scher from the Denver Post came to the prison to interview Angelina. She actually wrote an article about Angelina, and she refers to Angelina as Signora Angelina Garramone, and she also refers to her as an Italian peasant. So I don't know if she's calling her a peasant because she knows Angelina was from the southern Italy, or if she's saying this as a derogatory comment. And I have to wonder how much time Louise actually spent with Angelina, because in her article, she makes statements like, quote, "Angelina has the trick of always being surprised when a question is asked of her, and seems to have little thought as to what her acts involve." Now, granted, she could have gathered this information by just observing Angela during the court hearings, but she claims that she had a lot of conversations with Angelina. Louise, she also, this is interesting to me because we've talked about this before. She frequently insults Angelina regarding her looks, her demeanor, and the fact that she's Italian. But besides all these insults, she has these little moments where she seems to almost admire Angelina. For example, at one point in the article, she compliments Angelina's strength as a woman by saying, "Angelina has proved the statement that it is the little women who, after all, are the ones who do things." And so it's just interesting, like the dichotomy of that. She insults and compliments her all in one article. Yeah. Does she sort of admire her because she stood her own ground, even though if it wasn't good ground to stand on? But she couldn't quite fully commit to it because she's an Italian.
Right.
So here's another example of that. At one point, she describes Angelina as being ugly and wonderfully feminine within the same sentence. She says, quote, "With all her ugliness of face and figure, she has a tremendous feminine quality allied with a certain masculine shrewdness, which makes her recognize at sight the weak spots in people with whom she comes in contact." I need a moment to unpack that, please.
Yeah.
I don't know how to respond. I understand the admiration for Angelina. I hate to admit this, but I admire her in a really weird, strange way. Obviously not what she does, but her grit, I guess you could say, how she...
Yeah, she's just gung-ho, but she chooses the wrong path to be gung-ho about.
Yes, exactly. And she kind of goes against the grain for being in 1910.
Well, that's true.
Like I'm gonna do my own thing. I'm gonna be an independent woman, but my gosh, she chooses some crazy ways. So Angelina had been officially charged with the murder of Maria, and her trial was set to begin November 21st. So this meant that Angelina would be leaving the prison, which was outside of Denver, and temporarily relocating to the Denver jail. And this made a lot of the Italians in the Denver area really nervous that Angelina would be in such close proximity to them again. But the sheriff assured them that she would still be locked up, but their biggest fear was that Angelina would put the curse of the evil eye on them. Because she was getting a little closer to them. And I'm sure they were also nervous about seeing Angelina, in the courtroom or being taken from the courtroom to the jail.
Yeah.
So the state opened its case by introducing Maria's bones and her bones that still had clothes attached to them as evidence of her death. So many newspapers reported that Angelina either laughed or smiled when the state showed the bones of Maria. And if this is true, come on, what is wrong with you? You would hope her attorney would tell her to knock it off, or even prepped her for the trial, like don't laugh or make weird smiles or anything.
She does what she wants.
She does, exactly. And so the first witness that was called by the state was J.N. Johnson, and he owned the ranch where Maria's remains were found. And Johnson said that on August 4th, 1911, he found a shoe containing a human foot. And as he looked further, he found the skull, which still had hair attached. And during one part of his testimony, he said that he had found the remains on, quote, the most isolated part of his ranch. And this statement, it just made me think of poor Maria. I mean, she's 65 years old. She's looking for her husband. And because of this, she was killed and left in such an isolated place. It's just so sad. Bleak situation.
Right. And he said it's so far. What did he call that?
The most isolated part of his ranch.
Yeah. And how did they get all the way out there?
I know, because when they were describing the crime scene, to me, it sounded like they got off the rail and it happened like almost right there. Yeah, that's how I pictured it. Because they hid the cloak under the rail, right, whatever that thing was called. So H.S. Burton was the next to testify. And he was the county coroner. And he claimed that the remains were definitely human, but he couldn't determine the sex. And this testimony completely squashed Angelina's defense attorney's idea that nobody had even determined if the bones were human or not. I mean, come on, they found the skeleton of a human foot inside a shoe. And
the skull with the hair.
The skull with the hair. Remember the niece and nephew identified the clothes on the body still. And the niece of Maria, she took the stand and testified how she was able to identify the clothing and the shoes that were found with or on the remains, like we just said. She even recalled a story where she would help her aunt lace her shoes when she was not feeling well. And I thought that was pretty sweet. But again, that just proves like she was able to identify that that is a human shoe and that belongs to my aunt. Dominic, Maria's nephew, he testified as well and told the story of how Maria's husband, Michael, had disappeared. And he also told the court how he searched for his aunt after she disappeared. And of course, Concetta Forgione, she took the stand as well. And she had an interpreter during her testimony. And she repeated the same confession that she told the sheriff. Apparently, though, during her testimony, Concetta kept her eyes down and avoided looking at Angelina, who apparently kept saying she lies under her breath. And after Concetta's testimony, the prosecuting attorney, Samuel Johnson, brought up how Angelina had the reputation of possessing supernatural powers and tried to frighten Concetta and Stella with, quote, threats of witcheries.
That sounds like her.
Yeah, she would threaten for sure. And so Concetta testified that Angelina told her, if you don't keep your mouth shut, I know how to magnetize and you will get your throats cut too, because I know lots of witchery and tricks. And if you say anything, I will know it. So wow, that's kind of crazy. So Concetta admitted on the stand that she took half the money that Angelina took off of Maria's dead body out of fear that Angelina would be offended and retaliate against her. And there was one part of Concetta's testimony that I found really interesting. It was where the prosecutor questioned Concetta about the knife that cut Maria's throat. And here's part of that exchange between Concetta and the prosecutor. So, prosecutor, where did Miss Garramone get the knife? Concetta, I had the knife and a sack with a loaf of bread. Miss Garramone said she wanted the knife to cut the bread. Prosecutor, who gave her the knife? Concetta, I did. I thought she was going to cut the bread. Prosecutor, when Miss Garramone took hold of Miss LaGuardia, what did Miss LaGuardia say or do? Concetta, she didn't say anything. She didn't have time before her throat was cut. Prosecutor, did she make any noise? Concetta, no, she just coughed. Oh, geez.
Oh, boy.
Prosecutor, what did Miss Garramone do after Miss LaGuardia fell down? Concetta, as soon as the old lady fell down, she bent over her and got the money out of her clothes. Doesn't this feel so cold?
All right.
So Stella, she also testified, and the prosecutor began with more of the witchery talk. He had Stella look at and identify a petrified badger foot and a hawk's claw. He asked Stella how familiar she was with these two items, and Stella told him that Angelina gave them to her and her mother as good luck charms. Stella said they never worked and that she no longer believes in spells and witchery. I'm not really sure why the prosecutor brought this up, unless he's just trying to prove that he believes Angelina dabbles in witchery and is, maybe so the jury would fear her or not trust her. According to the Denver newspapers, Stella was apparently the most convincing witness for the prosecution. When the prosecutor asked Stella about immunity, she denied that she was promised immunity for her testimony, which probably gave her a little more credibility with the jury. She also claimed that she didn't come forward earlier about the murder because she feared Angelina would cut her throat also. Clover, the defense attorney for Angelina, also questioned Stella, and he basically had the same questions as the prosecutor. However, he did ask Stella, do you know that Miss Garramone might be put in prison or might be hung because of what you say? And this question was objected to and sustained, so Stella didn't have to answer. So Clover also asked Concetta if Angelina ever talked about fortune telling, and Concetta simply answered, no, sir. When Clover asked Concetta about the bread knife, her story was about the same as what she told the prosecutor, except she said Maria had the bread, not her. And I thought this was weird. It feels like this was completely skipped over by Clover. I mean, keep in mind, this is what was reported in the newspaper, and Concetta's testimony was told through an interpreter, so maybe things got a little overlooked. But that's a pretty big contradiction from Concetta on who was holding the knife. I mean, this explains how Angelina ultimately gets the knife. Did Concetta or Maria hand her the knife?
Right.
That's weird, right?
Yeah.
So in my opinion, this could change the whole story, especially if Maria had the knife. Did she hand Angelina the knife that would kill her? And I don't understand why the attorney just skipped over this.
Because that's big.
Clover did, however, try to discredit Concetta by bringing up her previous crime of assault against her children. And he asked her if she was ever convicted of a crime. And the prosecutor objected to this question, but Concetta was allowed to answer. And she answered truthfully, so the jury knew Concetta's background. And I'm surprised she actually answered the question and not pleaded the fifth. But so Clover's main defense was trying to prove an alibi for Angelina. He tried to prove that Angelina was in his office discussing her forgery charges when the murder apparently happened. So when he asked Concetta if she accompanied Angelina to his office that morning, she shut him down with a quick no, sir. So he's like, I'm trying to prove an alibi here. And he followed it up with questioning Concetta if she posted bond for Angelina that day. And Concetta responded yes, but that it was not in the morning, it was later in the day. So after the murder. Apparently, Concetta used a fake name to post the bond for Angelina. I mean, does that surprise any of us at this point? The name she used was Rosen's Albee, and that last name is very similar to the word alibi, which is kind of funny. So Clover really didn't get anywhere with trying to prove an alibi for Angelina. And the prosecutor was also able to dispute this alibi by providing a witness who worked at the Industrial School of Golden. And this witness said he saw the women at the train depot the morning of the murder. And Angelina eventually took the stand in her own defense. The prosecutor opened up his questioning by asking Angelina if she did business with Italian people and if she lost all her money to Italian people. She answered yes to both. Now, there was one interesting exchange between Angelina and the prosecutor regarding the word godmother. I'll read that exchange. So the prosecutor asked, "You knew your godmother, Maria LaGuardia, for about 18 years. Angelina responded, "She was not my godmother. She called me godmother." Prosecutor, "How old was she?" Angelina, "About 65 years old." Prosecutor, "And she called you godmother?" Angelina, "Yes, that is the way Italian people do sometimes." Prosecutor, "Well, can you name some old woman who calls a younger woman godmother?" Angelina, "She called me godmother, and I called her godmother too." Prosecutor, "Didn't you just say that you did not call her godmother?" Angelina, "Yes, but I misunderstood you." So I'm like, I don't know. It's interesting.
Keep going on asking that same thing, and it'll just keep getting different.
Just keep changing and changing. I personally believe Maria was Angelina's godmother, but who knows? So the state rested its case against Angelina on December 21st, 1911. And one interesting aspect of the murder trial was the prosecution never brought forward a motive for why Angelina murdered Maria. I know the prosecution doesn't have to prove motive, and in this case, the prosecutors relied on Concetta and Stella's confession and evidence like Maria's bones. But not even Concetta or Stella offered a motive for why Angelina murdered Maria. None that I could find anyways. And so it leaves room for speculation. Like, did Angelina want Maria's property and she refused? Did Angelina think she knew where Maria kept a lot of money? Did Maria catch on and disapprove of Angelina's real estate business? It's hard to say.
Yeah, because she thought that she had $700 and something on her, which turned out to be about half.
About half of that. Was it just for that money? I don't know. It's just the fact that there was no motive ever listed is very haunting. Interestingly, though, but not surprising, Luigi never showed up to the trial. Can't blame him.
Right.
I mean, but ultimately on December 23rd, 1911, the jury came back with a verdict of murder in the first degree with a recommendation of life in prison. And when the verdict was read, Angelina lowered her head and cried into a blue silk handkerchief. And her attorney immediately made a motion for a new trial. After the verdict, Angelina kept claiming that she knew Maria was alive and would come back to Denver to clear her name once she saw that Angelina was in prison. And, you know, that kind of sounds like something a godmother would do. Come clear your godchild's name. But what do I know? But obviously Maria, she never reappeared to clear her name. And Angelina, she went on to make other claims like Nicola Forgione, Concetta's husband, who also happened to work at a cemetery, set her up. She said he had to have robbed a grave and took the bones from the coffin, then put some of Maria's clothes on them, and then dumped the remains on the ranch where Maria's body was found. I mean, okay, I will say it is a little odd that both women were wrapped in the burlap that came from the cemetery.
Right, there's something weird
That's
there.
weird. But Angelina had connection with both of them. She could have got that. And why would Nicola Forgione go after, like, why would he do that?
Right.
Doesn't make any sense.
And that stuff could just been laying around, you know, and if she knew what she was doing, she'd be like, well, I'll just take it from them.
Exactly. Watch them leave their house and she goes and gets what she wants. Yeah. But after Angelina's conviction, many of the Italians in Denver claimed that Angelina brought discredit upon their race in Colorado, which I totally understand that. Yeah, exactly. Now, the day after the verdict was Christmas Eve, and Angelina was interviewed by a Mildred Geddes, who was with the Denver Post. And she told Mildred, quote, "My story of my life and troubles is just like a novel. Everyone had it in for me because they wanted Maria's money, and Concetta and Stella were paid to lie against me." So, you know, I mean, she's gonna deny it for sure. But when Mildred asked Angelina what she thought of the jury, Angelina said, quote, "I wish the jury best success for convicting a woman innocent, and I hope they have sweet dreams. I thought they had a good face, but they have a black heart." After Angelina was convicted, many of the local Denver newspapers compared her trial and conviction to other women who were accused of murder in the Denver area, and around the same time as Angelina. The woman she was compared to the most was a Gertrude Peterson, and the papers claimed Angelina and Gertrude's faces were what affected the jurors. One paper actually said, "Two faces which had a different effect on juries." So basically insinuating Gertrude's face has a more feminine and softer look than Angelina's. And in fact, in one paper, they even had the two women's faces right next to each other so that readers could compare the two women for themselves.
That's weird.
It's so weird. Gertrude was described in the papers as, quote, "beautiful, accomplished, and charming," and who, although she shot her husband in the back when the man was already dying from consumption, was acquitted. So as long as you're pretty, I guess. Now, unlike Angelina, who was described as something like, quote, "The law moved quickly yesterday in the district court, and an ignorant foreign woman was sentenced to life imprisonment for murdering Maria LaGuardia." It's a little different than Gertrude's description. So, and the paper also described Gertrude's weapon of choice as being, quote, "a more ladylike weapon. A revolver is so distinguished." Unlike Angelina's butcher knife, these comparisons are crazy.
They're talking about murder.
Right. I mean,
they're making it out like you're reading a comic book.
Exactly. Oh, that revolver is so distinguished in the hands of a pretty woman, unlike this woman from Italy with a butcher knife. It's just like, oh my gosh. So Angelina's murder trial, it was also compared to 4 other women's murder trials in the papers. So Assunta Molicana shot and killed her husband in their home. She was not convicted because the jury said she was justified in the killing because her husband was so cruel to her. Eleanor Valentine also shot and killed her husband. She pleaded that it was in self-defense and was acquitted of the murder. Beatrice Gordon, who the papers said was the most pathetic figure of all the women, so I guess that's a small win for Angelina. Beatrice killed a man she was having an affair with, and she also claimed self-defense and was acquitted. And then lastly, Helen Schmidlap shot and killed her husband, and she said he persuaded her to leave her first husband and marry him. And then once she married him, he was extremely abusive to her, and she also claimed self-defense and was acquitted. So I guess if Angelina had killed Luigi instead of Maria, she might have been okay. Like, it's crazy, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
To be fair, I don't know anything about those other cases. And if those men, were really cruel, then that could be something there. So speaking of Luigi, he went on and he actually divorced Angelina in 1913. And like we talked about in the very first episode, he ran that restaurant till 1936. And then his kids took over that restaurant and ran it till 1958.
Right, yeah.
I ordered Angelina's mugshot and a prisoner card from the Colorado State Archives. And her prisoner number was 8304. And then it had identifying features. And it lists age 36, weight 110, height 5 feet 1/2 inch, complexion dark, hair black short medium, eyes black, like creepy. Nationality Italian. And then it has a section marks and scars. And it says 3 marks below the breast. Like, what happened there? Holy smokes. I do have to say her mugshot is I don't want to say cool, but it's very unique. And we've talked about her smile that she gives, and you'll see it when you look at her mugshot.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing that.
As soon as you see it, you'll have that. She just has like this sly smile on her face. I don't know. I don't want to say cool, but it's an interesting one. And so now Angelina applied for a pardon in 1920, but was denied. And most likely because many of the Italians in Denver protested her pardon.
Well, that's good.
They didn't want her out. In May of 1921, the parole board reduced her sentence to 22 years. But in May of 1922, she was actually granted parole for life. So basically they set her free.
Wow.
Yeah. So she was, 1911 when she was convicted? So just a little over 11 years. In October of 1922, at the age of 47, she walked out of prison a free woman after serving a little over 11 years. And so at this time, Angelina and numerous other criminals were pardoned by the governor, Oliver Shoup. So basically, the governor randomly pardoned criminals ranging from murders like Angelina to bank robbers. And the Fort Collins Express reported that after these pardons, Shoup received approval and support from bank bandits, bootleggers, second-story men, which I had to look that up. Second-story men are burglars who enter through an upper-story window. I've never heard of that before.
No, the axe man always went through
through the door,
yeah.
the first floor door. But when Angelina was pardoned, she feared the Italian community in Denver would seek revenge upon her. So she immediately fled to Youngstown, Ohio. And the judge who proceeded over Angelina's murder trial was really not happy that she was released. He advised against her 1920 pardon, but said he was never told of her release. And he agreed that it was wise for her to leave Denver.
Well, I'm sure they were all happy that she was gone.
Oh, yeah.
I still wouldn't trust her.
No, absolutely not. And I don't know why Angelina went to Ohio. I don't know if she had some sort of a connection there. I researched this quite a bit, but couldn't find much except an obituary in the Columbus Dispatch, which is a paper in Columbus, Ohio. And the obituary was for a Filomeno Lasasso, who was 88 when she died in 1933. So Angelina's mother's name was Maria Filomeno Lasasso, but I don't know if it's her mother or not because the dates and age don't add up exactly. So her mother was born in 1840, so that would have made her 93 in 1933. However, birth records and census records, they weren't accurate at that time. But I'm pretty sure it's not her because Angelina said her mother died in 1915. But it was just a weird connection. Same names, pretty close to the date.
And she picked that town.
And Angelina would have been 57 in 1933, so definitely not her obituary. But Angelina, she had a few theories of her own regarding who framed her and murdered Maria. She thought maybe Maria's nephew, Dominic Tito, murdered Maria because he owed her $1,500 and didn't want to pay it back. Clyde was another suspect in Angelina's eyes. She thought Clyde would get money from Dominic if he helped Dominic pin the murder on Angelina. And remember, Clyde was the one who helped Dominic search for Maria. And she also thought that many in the Italian community sought revenge against her for losing their money in the real estate transaction. So, I mean, it's interesting. Concetta and Stella Forgione were fined $1, which is about $30 now, and each had to spend 1 day in jail. The judge told him that he did not feel that they were very guilty, and the 5 months that they had already served was punishment enough. Now, Stella, she ran into some legal trouble a few months after the trial. She was working for a company named Colorado Laundry, and one day she received her paycheck for $2.35, but she decided she wanted a little bit more money, so she just changed that check to say $5.35. Of course,
gave herself a raise.
Gave herself a little raise. Yep, she got a tip that day. The company, of course, caught on to this, and she was arrested, and she just ended up serving 6 weeks in jail. And it was interesting because Stella's crime was compared to Angelina and her crimes. The detective that arrested Stella said it was a typical Garramone forgery trick. She learned from her probably.
Right,
so
that's what I was thinking.
Stella, she later married a Francis Jones on October 2nd, 1921. And they had one daughter, Ruth Jones, who was born in 1913. And according to the 1930 census, the family actually moved to Amarillo, Texas. And there was a rumor that they moved to Texas because Francis was a chef in Denver and had an opportunity to open his own restaurant. And I have a feeling Stella probably just wanted out of Denver at this point.
Yeah, probably time to start over.
Exactly. Now, Stella ended up using, and this should not surprise any of us, a lot of different names throughout her life. She frequently used Ethel Smith and Ethel Jones. And now Jones was her married name, but she used Ethel a lot. And maybe Ethel was her middle name. I don't know. But There were rumors that Stella was ashamed of being Italian, so she Americanized her name. So keep that in mind. However, there was also rumors that she feared Angelina, so that could have been a part of the reason why she changed her name. But after her move to Texas, Stella became estranged with her family in Denver. And hopefully, she could move on and have a happy life. And she ended up dying in 1980. Now, Concetta, she stayed in Denver and passed away in September of 1940. And in 1916, Concetta was in the papers for a car accident that injured her pretty badly. And like her daughter, Stella, and everybody else in this story, Concetta used a different first name. Her name was listed as Gladys Forgione in the paper. And I'm pretty sure it was her, though, because the paper listed the names of her children that were with her and matched Concetta's actual children. So, and I found her obituary in the Denver Post, and she again had a different name. Her name was Constance Lemme, so Lemme. Constance Concetta, I can get that one, but that is a completely different last name. But again, I was able to verify it was her because all the children's names matched her names. So, and she was listed as the wife of a Martin Lemme. So she apparently got married at some point. I couldn't find the marriage license. And maybe she also wanted to Americanize her name as well, like her daughter. I mean, I imagine she probably wanted to escape her reputation. She was probably scared of Angelina too. So now, while I was researching this, and we've talked about this a little bit, it was just very interesting how they described Angelina in the newspapers. Of course, they described her looks and, her femininity and all of that, but they really went after her being Italian. And I'm not trying to defend Angelina's actions, but I guess I'm defending her Italianness here, if that makes sense. I'm just going to read a couple of descriptions of Angelina and or Italians in general that they put out in the papers during her trial and stuff. And these are all quotes from Denver newspapers. When this Italian peasant warms herself out of her physical lethargy, she radiates animation. The innocence of a child, which is characteristic of so many Italians, shown in every word of Miss Garramone. And here's another one. Her face is that of a gypsy fortune teller, and there is something sinister in her protruding lower lip. They went after her on so many levels, rightfully so in some ways, for sure. But like I said, I think if I'm defending anything, I'm defending her Italianness. But with that is the story of Angelina Garramone. I wish I knew what happened to her after she was released from prison and went to Ohio. I can't help but wonder, did she ever go back to Denver? I mean, she had kids there. She had grandkids there. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
And I have a note in here from 2023 when I did this episode the first time that I would keep searching every once in a while to see if something popped up. And I found a couple of articles that I didn't find the first time, but nothing that kind of gives away what happened to her. So it would be really interesting, though, to know where she ended up.
I know.
Because she probably had a different name.
That's what I was just going to say.
Well, if you've enjoyed all 4 of these episodes about Angelina Garramone, we'd love it if you subscribed, rate, followed our podcast. We're on all the podcast streaming platforms and social media. You can find us by typing in Italian American Stories. And we hope you enjoyed listening to the last episode of Angelina's story. And we hope you come back to listen to more stories about Italian Americans. See you next time.
See you next time.